Gibson and Fender are incredibly successful guitar companies, and they do make some good guitars, some great guitars. The thing is though, their success isn't entirely due to their guitars. It is due to some very basic marketing principles that once you understand them, you start seeing them everywhere. And this video, we're going to break down secret marketing genius of Gibson and Fender. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Ministry of Guitar. I'm Utkarsh, coming to you from Singapore. As always, if you like what I'm doing, please do consider subscribing to the Substack, not the YouTube channel. Because this is my attempt, ironically enough, given the topic of this video, to move this channel, this property Ministry of Guitar, from an advertising-based business model, where how this channel makes money is essentially through advertising revenue that YouTube shares with the channel, to a direct-to-consumer-based business model. And the thing is, the advantages of this is that it remains independent, because when you're dependent on advertising dollars, whether it's advertising or even sponsors that other channels do, then you aren't independent. In any case, let's get back into the main topic. I want to start this off by underlining something important. I'm not saying that there are marketing geniuses working for Gibson and Fender, or there have been in the past. I just think that these strategies that have led to tremendous success for both the companies have just been a result of companies evolving over time, learning over time, seeing what works in the marketplace. So this is not to say that what they have been doing, their management, etc., has been particularly amazing. It's just these strategies have essentially worked out really well. And it is the foundation on which this entire industry, not just Gibson and Fender, but this entire guitar industry is based. To illustrate these marketing principles, we'll start off with something very simple. We'll start off by looking at two guitars from the lens of a non-guitarist. I want you to think about an Epiphone Les Paul, like my first Epiphone Les Paul. And I want you to think about a Gibson R9, like the one in the corner, hiding in the corner over there. Let's think about it from a non-guitarist perspective, right? Just try to step out of the shoes of all the YouTube videos that you've seen and all the things you've heard. What are we essentially having with these two guitars? We're having two guitars, both made from mahogany of the same shape, that have the same features as far as you can see, because both of them have two of these things that make sound, the humbuckers. They have a bridge, they have 22 frets, they look very similar. In a photo, unless somebody shows you the headstock, you can't really tell the difference, and to the untrained eye, they will not even notice that the headstock is a significant difference. So what is it that really separates these two? Why is it that an Epiphone Les Paul can be as low as $600, $700, maybe $800 in today's world, new, and a Gibson Les Paul or a Gibson Custom Shop Les Paul can be as high as $20,000, $30,000? I'm just talking new prices here, because in the used market, it's a whole different kettle of fish, but the principles apply. Think similarly of a Squier Telecaster, Butterscotch Telecaster, and think of the most expensive Butterscotch Telecaster that the Fender Custom Shop Master Build can build you. Again, fairly identical if you look at it from a non-guitarist perspective. They're both made from wood. You could say both of them are made from ash, if you want to get that specific, though many people will not. But I can imagine non-guitarists will ask, is there a difference in the material? Oh, they're both made from ash. Okay, great. They both have 21 frets. They both have two pickups, they both have a bridge, they both have the same number of volume controls. So what is the difference? Why is, again, one worth $400 and the other can be worth $20,000 if it's the right master built one? Answering this question will answer what is it that makes the guitar industry tick. And it boils down to three basic marketing principles and one basic human principle or human truth.
The closest shave is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Mach 3.
The first principle that I want to talk to you about is halo. H-A-L-O, halo. Halo is the principle by which you have a hero product for any company, and that creates a halo effect on other products. I'm going to use a very simplistic example from a company that I used to work with. For those of you who don't know, the reason why I'm giving you this marketing breakdown is I used to work in marketing for 15 years. And towards the latter end of this particular stint, I was heading marketing for one of the most iconic brands that you may have heard of for certain parts, certain countries in this part of the world. So let's just take that brand for fun, right? Gillette. Gillette is, of course, known for its, the best technology that it brings from into the world of shaving, right? You had the Mark III with the 3 blades, and you had the 5 blades. A lot of people think it's called Mark V. It's not. It's called Fusion, so on and so forth. And at any point in time, you have the confidence that the best shaving product, regardless of the cost, the best razor is being made by Gillette. The implication of this is that Gillette doesn't only make the expensive razors. If you go down to cheaper razors made by Gillette, say disposable razors, use and throw razors, or even cheaper ones, the country that I come from, India, you have Gillette, which still makes those old straight, what's called a double-edge razor. You may recognize this, that maybe your granddad used to use. The thing is, because Gillette makes the best product, there is an assumption of quality and performance from all its products, not just the most expensive one, but even the cheapest ones. So if Gillette sells a whatever $20 razor or $25 razor, the $5 razor that it's selling or the $2 razor that it's selling is also receiving that halo that Gillette makes the best products. This is a very simple marketing principle. You'll see it across the board. You'll see it in the car industry, for example. One of the reasons why, if you think about, let's say a good example, let's just take Volkswagen. The Volkswagen Group. One of the reasons why they created this particular car, the first 1,000 horsepower car, the Bugatti Veyron, is to show what the Volkswagen Group could do. That they could make a Bugatti Veyron, right? A 1,000 horsepower car, an iconic car. And because of that, everybody knows that this is the engineering prowess of this Volkswagen Group. And as a consequence, your humble Volkswagen Golf.
People are people, so why should it be?
You and I should get along so often.
Volkswagen Golf is a product of the same company that makes the Bugatti Veyron. So you have the confidence that, hey, I am getting, even though I'm buying a 20,000 pound car or whatever it might be, it's the same company that has the capability to make that £1,000,000 car. Now, what does Halo depend on? Halo depends on having a hero product, and from that hero product, the the brand equity halos down on the other products. In the case of the guitar industry, this really happened by accident. Fender and Gibson did not set out to make a halo product. It just happened. It just happened that the 1959 Les Paul became a weapon of choice for so many rock and roll or rock bands in the 60s and 70s. You have so many, whether it's Eric Clapton using it on Beano, Jimmy Page using it in general, so many more. And similarly for Fender, of course, the Telecaster made iconic through the Rolling Stones, the Strat made iconic through Jimi Hendrix, Pink Floyd, and the list goes on and on. I don't need to tell you, you know all of this. So the point is, accidentally, a hero product was established. The 1959 Les Paul, the Strat, the 50s pre-CBS Strat, the pre-CBS Tele. Now, for the longest time, Gibson and Fender did not realize the power of this halo product. In the early 80s is when they started realizing, or rather Gibson started realizing, when it started trying to reissue this halo product, the 1959 Les Paul, the Burst, 858 to 60 technically. Right? That's when they started realizing that, hey, we have a product that is iconic. But what they had not realized is the impact that that product had had on their business, that because that hero product was associated with excellence, was associated with the movement, the entire company, all its products received a halo as a consequence. Right? That is the reason why they could try out different shapes, different experiments, and all of the products had some chance in the marketplace because they were branded a Gibson or they were branded a Fender, because Gibson and Fender were the ones who made those iconic products. Look around you in the world, you'll see this across the board, right? Any company, any brand that you can think of, there's probably a hero product that established the brand equity, and then a lot of products are receiving a halo. Now, this halo doesn't extend indefinitely, particularly in very functional technical products. We'll get to this whole aspect of functionality later in this video. But the base of a company, of a brand, is set by a hero product. So hero halo is the reason why Gibson and Fender, even till today, these hero products have not just become heroes. Now they've turned into myths, they've turned into legends, they've turned into $1 million guitars in certain cases. If you look at, just take both Gibson and Fender, their business model entirely depends on the halo from the 1959 Les Paul, the pre-CBS Strat, the pre-CBS Telecaster. You see it across price points. Fender is using the price for the halo from the Telecaster or the Strat, from $100 Bullet Strat to a made in Mexico, to a made in Japan Strat, to a US whatever Ultra, whatever it's called now, professional Strat, to a basic custom shop Strat, to a master build Strat. All across price points, you're seeing the halo of the pre-CBS Strat. And similarly for Gibson, you can spell out the products for yourself. Interestingly, Fender and Gibson are the main ones where they have such a powerful halo from such a powerful product, because the products are no longer hero products, they are halo products. So understand this, that a big chunk of the appeal, of the success, of your apparent perception of excellence above any product, not just the guitar industry, is built on the halo of a hero product that has left an impression either on you or on the world in general. Now, this brings me to the next principle. And it's called anchoring. What is anchoring? Anchoring is setting an expectation, and because of setting expectation, your behavior changes. Let me explain this in a more simplistic way. I'll use an example that was actually used all the time in marketing trainings that I did and I attended. All right. If you're selling, and sorry, I keep going back to the world of cars. If you're selling, say something like a Rolls Royce or a Bentley, $200,000, $300,000 car. If you take it to what would be your logic? What's the better place to sell it? Do you sell it in a car show, or do you sell it in a yacht show? Think about it for a second. Initially, you'd be like, of course, I'm going to sell it in a car show. That's where it's a car, right? In the car show, you have a Rolls Royce or a Bentley, which is one of the most expensive cars that you can get. It's significantly, maybe 10 times, 5 times more than other cars in the show, and it looks very expensive. One big myth that people have is that rich people or people of any ilk, they just, there comes a point where people just don't care about money. I know some very, very rich people, they care about every penny. The thing is, it just makes the Rolls Royce look a little bit excessive, a little bit frivolous, right? And of course, a lot of us know that there's a lot of part sharing that happens even with most expensive cars to cheaper cars, just as a business. So this kind of exposes it. In the context of a yacht show, where yachts may cost millions of dollars, suddenly a $300,000 Rolls Royce doesn't seem that expensive. The expectation is set in this particular setting, that you are talking about millions of dollars worth of product, and then in that context, suddenly it doesn't look that expensive. We see this with property as well. Just to use another example, real estate. What you see sometimes is when you have new real estate being launched in an area, and new real estate is typically a bit more expensive because your developers need to recoup costs. There's a lot of marketing that goes into building an image for that new real estate. You see, when there is new real estate and new developments in an area, you would expect that, hey, there is more supply of real estate in the area, hence prices should go down. So, right? Supply demand. More supply means there is more supply for the same demand, so prices should go down. What really happens is prices go up across the board usually. We see this a lot in Singapore, for example. And the reason why prices go up is that suddenly there's an anchoring of the new price, the price of the new launch, the price of the new building versus the existing building. Suddenly your existing building looks cheap because the new building is quite expensive. So more demand, a lot of demand comes there, and then the pricing goes up. Now, this doesn't exist in isolation. just so that we don't make this a universal theory of real estate. There are other factors, but I just want to give you an example of when you set the expectation of pricing. Think about this also in the context of when you're given three options. When you're given three subscription options to a platform or three plans, what you'll notice when you look at the plans, you'll have a high plan that is really expensive. You'll have a low plan that is really shitty, doesn't have much features, and you'll have a middle plan that seems to be the sweet spot. It is no accident that this middle plan seems to be the sweet spot. It's by design, because you're anchored to the price of the high plan, and that seems terrible because it's too high for you. And then using a smart intersection of features, you kind of design it so that the middle one just looks incredible value. Why does the middle one look incredible value? How much is it worth to begin with? You have no idea. You have no idea how to price it. Your pricing expectation is kind of set by the fact that is how much the high plan stands for. Now, what does this have to do with guitars? Because we seem to have taken a tangent. Everything. Because what has the guitar industry anchored itself to? What is the significant driver, or rather setter, of price in the guitar industry? It is the same hero products, the same mythological, legendary products. It is the vintage guitar market. And the vintage guitar market, because it has such low supply, because there were very few guitars built, fewer of them survived in good condition. So the vintage guitar market is where you have $100,000 guitars, $200,000 guitars, and so on and so forth. So again, if you are comparing a Gibson custom shop to an Epiphone, you're like, why the hell am I paying $6,000 or $7,000 for something I can get for $700? All right. In theory, if you really think about it, the Gibson custom shop of today is more comparable to the Epiphone of today than the Gibson Les Paul of 1959 to 60. It's very simple, because the wood that it is getting made of is coming from today, right? The wood that they were using, I'm just trying to be very, very particular about it, but the wood, the metal, everything that they were using, as much as Gibson custom shop has made an entire separate tangent altogether of getting closer and closer to 59. Reality is that two guitars are getting made in 2025 and one guitar was made back in 1960. The world, regulatory environment, everything has changed so dramatically that you're actually closer to the guitar getting made in 2025, regardless of what the differences you think are, versus the guitar made in 60. Yet Gibson does such a wonderful job of creating this false equivalence, almost I would say, between the R9 and the 1959 Les Paul through featureization. We'll get to this featureization in a second. That's going to be my next point. Through featureization, they do such an incredible thing of making the 1959 Les Paul the benchmark, or the vintage guitar the benchmark, that in the context of vintage guitar pricing, suddenly a Gibson custom shop looks like good value. Sometimes they've been very blatant about it, right? You think of things like the collector's choice, where they're so-called replicated exactly vintage guitars, even though one very simple example is that vintage guitars contain Brazilian rosewood and modern guitars simply can't, for the most part, right? But nonetheless, they created this illusion of false equivalence with these exact replicas. They do this all the time. I have a Slash double neck, which is supposed to be an exact replica, through relicking of the Knocking on Heaven's Door guitar. So what Gibson and Fender do, Gibson more so, is that they use the anchoring of the vintage guitar pricing, create a false equivalence between their new guitar and the old guitar through featureization. I'm going to explain featureization in a second. And then they use that to justify the pricing and create a certain value for the company, right? So anchoring is everywhere. You see this across the board. Next time you're choosing something, even in the store when you're choosing something, the retailers, you will realize that retailers keep some very expensive brands and you wonder who the hell buys them. Some people do, but generally it is very smart strategy to have something expensive so that it makes the middle price product look cheap in comparison. That was anchoring. Let's get into the third principle, featureization.
Hello, ladies. Look at your man. Now back to me. Now back at your man. Now back to me. Sadly, he isn't me. But if he stopped using lady-scented body wash and switched to Old Spice, he could smell like he's me. Look down. Back up. Where are you? You're on a boat with the man your man could smell like. What's in your hand? Back at me. I have it. It's an oyster with 2 tickets to that thing you love. Look again. The tickets are now diamond. Anything is possible when your man smells like Old Spice and not a lady. I'm on a horse.
Featureization is something that is so what should I say? You don't realize it, but it's really all around you. I want you to start about by thinking of soap. Back in the day, just maybe say 70, 80 years ago, you had soap. That was it, right? You just had soap. You used it on your face, you used it on your hair, you used it everywhere. Then somebody realized that, hey, if why, and this is by the way how segments are created, how market segments are created. Why the hell are people using the same soap on the hair and the skin? Because they're different. Why don't we separate the hair, the skin, the soap being used on the hair? Then instead of buying one product, people will buy two products. Hence, shampoo was created. After that, it got into, hey, why do you have the same soap for the face and the body? You should have something for the face and something for the body. Oh, face wash and body wash, right? You see where this is going? Think of it, and then it gets further. Oh, why do you have the same men and women using the same thing? You should have, because their skin is different. They are different, by the way. I know this, having worked for what I did. They are different. Why do the men and women use the same thing? So then you have male body wash, female body wash, and then when we get to facial skincare products, then that's the whole ballgame. The entire skincare industry is based on constant featureization. You need a cleanser to clean your face. You need a scrub to remove the dead cells. You need a toner to prepare your skin. You need so on and so forth. Featureization exists all around you. Any segment that you look at, where you see that there's a differentiation that has been created, that is literally featureization. Yeah, it's all over the place. Now, what does this have to do with guitars? What guitars have done is they have created this featureization. They have trained you and me. For example, a great example is plain maple versus flame maple. There was no such differentiation, say, in 1958 to 60 when the original Les Paul was being made. Some guitars had like a plainer top, some guitars had a more flame top. Today, of course, you pay extra for a flame top. If you think of a brand or a company like PRS, you have a normal top, then you have a 10 top, then you have a wood library, or rather a artist grade top, and then you have a private stock grade top. 4 grades of maple. Even Gibson went that way. They started grading the maple from A, maple, double A, triple A. These are all made up human terminology. Not to say there aren't differences in the how the maple looks, but this is a false featureization. Then, for example, the wood in itself, you have normal wood and then you have hand selected wood. Think about it. If you were going to tell me what the difference between a custom shop Gibson and Epiphone Les Paul was, you'd say the mahogany on the Gibson is better. Why is it better? Oh, it's selected, it's lighter, it's more resonant. Mahogany is mahogany. The fact that we're differentiating it so much is a human construct, right? Similarly, let's talk about the rosewood, right? Same thing. So let's keep woods aside. Let's just talk about the materials being used for the frets, or the materials being used for the electronics. When was the last time you checked what material and for being used for the electronics on your refrigerator or on your television? Are you going and checking that this television has stainless steel, whatever, right? You are not, because you have not been trained so by the marketing industry or the companies marketing the product. So what I'm trying to say is all of these differentiations that you create in your head of what differentiates an Epiphone Les Paul versus the Gibson custom shop. And there are differences. I've talked about this in my other video in terms of amount of time needed to spend on the product. And by the way, creating these differentiations is not free. For a company to actually hand select for a better piece of maple, or to choose indeed a better material for certain aspects of the guitar, is indeed more expensive. So it's not. I'm not saying companies are doing this for free. There is an inherent cost to featureizations. To companies to create 2 separate pieces of packaging for male and female, for 2 separate pieces of packaging and 2 different formulas for face wash and body wash, there is a cost to it. So I'm not saying that this is all fake. It is certainly not fake. But it is, at the end of the day, a net positive to the company, because the amount of money they invest in the featureization is way lesser than the amount of money they earn from the consumer value that is created by consumers paying more or buying more. So featureization is a big aspect of how Gibson justifies aspect 1 and aspect 2, right? We talked about the hero product, the 1959 Les Paul, or the pre-CBS Strat or Tele. Then we have the false equivalence that is established between this hero product and the product that you can buy today, and to some extent cheaper products as well. And this is done through featureization, where you're trained to know that, for example, you're trained to know that pre-CBS strats had Brazilian rosewood or so on and so forth, right? Back then, they were just using rosewood. All of these things came later. They basically used what was available. Now, we've got the three principles here. We've got halo, we've got anchoring, and we've got featureization. But I would be remiss if I did not mention the main thing, the main driver of the guitar industry. And to understand this, you have to understand why people buy anything at all. I've talked about this in my other video, the previous video that I made. I've made many videos on talking about the marketing principles, but I'm going to repeat myself here in case you haven't seen that. What is the reason someone buys a product? There is either a functional job to be done. There's a job you need to get done. You need to hammer a nail, you buy a hammer. I'm making it very basic, but it's true. You need to get from A to B, you buy a car, so on and so forth. Maybe you could say you take a Uber. That also delivers the same functional job to be done. But there's a functional thing that you need to do. That's one reason people buy a product. The second reason why people buy a product is an emotional need. And the second one can often be much more powerful than the first one.
Advertising is based on one thing: happiness. And you know what happiness is? Happiness is the smell of a new car. It's freedom from fear. It's a billboard on the side of the road that screams with reassurance that whatever you're doing, it's okay.
What is an emotional need? An emotional need could be going back to why, for example, women spend so much on skincare. There is an emotional need to look more beautiful, for example, and there are all of these reasons why this particular product will make you look more beautiful. I'm oversimplifying skincare dramatically, but I'm just trying to just illustrate it with a rather crude example for you to understand the difference between an emotional need, which may create a lot of functional justification, right? So the emotional need will often be justified functionally. Like in the case of skincare, it is justified as, oh yes, this particular product has this particular ingredient from the mountains of the Himalayas or whatever it might be. Now, let's talk about emotional need in the context of the guitar industry. The thing is, both Gibson and Fender have often gone down the path of functional needs. Think of the most famous example of 2015 Gibson line of the 2015 Gibson lineup, where they introduced the now ill-fated robot trainers, no, tuners, not trainers, robot tuners, and a slew of other features. It bombed. Gibson made the mistake of thinking that people are buying Gibson because they want a better guitar, they want a better functioning guitar. It's a different matter that the robot tuners were flawed from a design perspective, but it's not the only time that Gibson tried to make a more functional guitar. Think about the high performance series that it made with a better neck shape, better compound radius, so on and so forth. Coil splits, all of that. The reality is that Gibson's success has never really come, at least in the last, I would say, since the 50s or the 60s, Gibson's success hasn't really come from making a better guitar, from making a functional guitar. Gibson hasn't really been in the business of serving a functional need. Because if you think about it, the functional need to have an instrument that can make music, that can be done at any price point. That can be done at very cheap price points. You don't need a $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 guitar. The main purpose, and this is still a very powerful purpose, and this is still a very deep need that Gibson has been, and Fender, and a lot of guitar companies have been in the business of fulfilling, is an emotional need. To understand how powerful an emotional need can be, I want you to take a detour with me to a company called Singer, ironically started by Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden, started by his cousin. There's a company called Singer, Singer Vehicle Design. They make the perfect Porsche 911, because there is, much like you have the myth of the 1959 Les Paul, you have the myth of the air-cooled 911, the perfect 911. And what they do is they take cars, second-hand cars from the late 80s and early 90s, the particular generation of the Porsche 911, the last air-cooled Porsche 911, and I would be doing a great disservice to say they swoop it up. They don't. They are artists. They do a really good job. They completely rebuilt the car, but of course it's still the same car, still registered according to the original second-hand car. But they redo the engine, redo the body, redo the upholstery, redo everything, right? Now, can you buy a car that is faster than a Singer Porsche? Easily. Any ordinary Tesla is faster than the Singer Porsche. Can you buy a car that is more luxurious than the Singer Porsche? Easily. Any standard Mercedes S-Class or BMW 7 Series or whatever is more luxurious. Can you buy a car that technically handles better, can take the corners better than a Singer Porsche? You can buy a cheap, relatively cheaper, smaller sports car like what you get with Alpine. I'm giving examples, car examples here, so don't hate on me if you don't know about cars. Just know that you can do all of these things easily. Yet, Singer has a waiting list of over 3 years, and each of the cars costs 2 million, 3 million, can cost several $1,000,000 depending on what you do with it. So, what explains this? Why do you have a car that is functionally worse than a $20,000-$30,000 car that you can buy easily off the market, whether it's speed, whether it is luxury, whether it is whatever actual performance? Why is it that car? Why are people paying millions of dollars for the privilege?
5 a.m. No one else is on the road. The sun has not come up yet. There's a romance to sitting in the car, just starting it up, hearing that flat six fire, turning on the headlights, and knowing that I have a couple of hours of absolutely nothing in front of me other than the scream of this motor.
Well, much like there's a spirit of rock and roll that you cannot recapture, the spirit of being a certain age, the spirit of maybe seeing Led Zeppelin live, the spirit of maybe being in a Laser Floyd concert, maybe actually being there at Woodstock. There's something you cannot. It's a money can't buy thing. Much like you have that, you have the same thing for the car industry. You have that drive that you took. You have that car that you lusted after when you were 9 or 10 years old. You have that perfect vision of a car that existed in your head, but then when you actually went and bought a Porsche 911 from that period, wasn't exactly what you expected. But then Singer makes exactly what you expected, the product of your dreams, right? What I'm trying to say is that it's a very, very deep emotional human need, the fulfillment of a dream. Whether it's a fulfillment of a dream car, whether it's a fulfillment of a dream life, a fulfillment of a dream guitar, whether it's a reminder of a certain moment in time. If you are now, when you were young, you had no money and you couldn't do anything. Now you are in your 50s or 60s, and you have more money than you could imagine when you were young, but you're no longer young. You can no longer recapture what it was like to be 17 or 21. That is a very deep emotional need. And that is the emotional need on which a big chunk of the guitar business, at least the expensive guitar business, is based. Because what Gibson and Fender do is that, at least at this point in time, they recognize that they have a huge customer base that grew up in the 1960s and 70s and 80s. It was a very magical period for popular music, even for someone like me who did not experience it and sees it from a distance, from the 2000s when I got into music. It looks like a magical period. It looks like a mythical period. And to recapture the spirit of that period, to be alive in that period, to, if only for a second, actually be transported back to that age of rock and roll. That is such a deep emotional need for so many people, not just people who lived through that era, that Gibson and Fender can indeed create these products that are time machines that transport you to that period. Is it logical? Does it make sense? Is it rational? I think not really, but it is deeply human. It is very deeply human, and that is what you have to understand, that ultimately a lot of what we call marketing is based on these very, very human needs. And that's why, beyond making amazing guitars, Gibson and Fender are truly marketing geniuses in a way, and that explains a lot of their success. Alright folks, let me know what you think of this video. Was it helpful? Did you like it? And I'll see you next time.